Rescue team sees pig in swarm of bees. What happened next is unbelievable. It began with a sound that didn't belong to the afternoon. A shrill, broken cry, high and frightened, echoing across the edge of the fields. The rescue team stopped their truck listening. The breeze carried the scent of dry grass and something else, sharp, sweet, and heavy, like honey warmed in the sun. Then they saw it, a blur of movement near the acacia grove. The air shimmered, alive with motion. Bees, hundreds, maybe thousands, swirling in a golden haze. And at the center of it, a shape struggling, rolling weakly in the dirt. A pig. He was young, not yet grown, pale pink beneath a thin coat of coarse hair. His small body quivered, covered in dark spots that moved. Bees crawled across his ears, his neck, his snout. Each sting left a welt, rising fast against the skin. He squealed again, the sound sharp, panicked, almost pleading. The rescuers froze for a moment. The swarm was still thick, angry, loud enough to drown the rustle of leaves. No one rushed in. Instead, one man pulled his jacket tight around his face, the other grabbed a length of cloth and waved it gently, trying to break the cluster without violence. "Shh. Easy," one whispered, voice muffled through fabric. "Bass. Bass." The bees circled wildly, drawn by the movement, but the men kept their distance, fanning smoke from a tin can one of them carried, a small trick from a local farmer. Slowly, the chaos began to break apart. The hum softened. Some bees lifted away, others dropped to the ground, still buzzing faintly before going still. When the air began to clear, they moved closer. The pig lay on his side now, panting hard, foam at the edges of his mouth. His eyelids were swollen nearly shut, his body slick with sweat and mud. His legs twitched as if trying to stand, but they wouldn't hold. One rescuer knelt beside him, careful not to startle. He brushed a few dead bees from the pig's ear, then poured cool water from a bottle over the wounds. The skin pulsed faintly beneath the flow. The animal didn't resist, only let out a small, hoarse grunt, the sound of exhaustion more than fear. They covered him with a damp cloth to ease the burning and lifted him onto a makeshift stretcher, their hands moving slowly, almost reverently. The swarm, now scattered, drifted toward the trees, the last few bees circling aimlessly in the quiet air before vanishing into the branches. When the rescuers loaded him into the back of the truck, the youngest of them paused, hand resting lightly on the pig's side. Beneath his palm he could feel a heartbeat, faint, uneven, but there. The sun hung low as they drove toward the shelter, its light spilling gold over the fields. In the distance, the hum had faded completely. Only the engine remained, steady and low, carrying them toward safety. Behind them, the field was still again, a place where a small life had fought against thousands of wings, and somehow still breathed. By evening, the sky had turned the color of fading embers. At the rescue station, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and hay. The pig lay on a blanket spread over the cool cement floor, his body trembling in slow, uneven waves. His breathing came shallow and fast, the rhythm of a creature caught between sleep and pain. The rescuers worked quietly. One brought a bucket of clean water, another laid out a small jar of ointment, herbal, made for burns and stings. A third sat nearby, wiping away dried mud from the pig's ears with a damp cloth. Each movement was slow, careful, as if any sudden sound might break him further. They named him Moti, for the pale shine of his skin under the lantern light. It was a name said softly, more out of comfort than ownership. His eyes were swollen nearly shut. Tiny welts still marked his shoulders and snout, clustered like stars over pale skin. The ointment eased the heat, leaving a faint scent of herbs and oil. From time to time, he shifted, a soft grunt escaping his throat, a weak attempt to rise that ended in stillness again. Outside, the crickets began their slow chorus. The world beyond the rescue shed was black and endless, but inside, the light pooled around the little body fighting to live. One of the rescuers knelt beside him and whispered, "Bass, sab thi ko jaiga." The tone was quiet, steady. Words weren't meant for understanding, only for presence. Hours passed. They gave him water through a small syringe, a few drops at a time. Most spilled, some stayed. Every sip mattered. They dabbed cool cloths along his neck, letting the water run down in thin rivulets. His breathing deepened. At midnight, the hum of the bees seemed like a memory, something left behind in the fields. Now, there was only the steady rhythm of life returning. The pig's ears twitched when one rescuer adjusted the lantern. His hind leg moved, slow but certain. A small sound escaped him. A low grunt, rough but alive. One of the men looked up and smiled faintly. "Sunatumne?" he murmured. "He's talking again." No one answered, but the relief was shared in silence. They kept watch until the moon slid low in the sky. By dawn, the swelling had softened. The worst was passing. The little creature now lay curled, no longer flat and limp. His breathing, once frantic, now came in long, even sighs. When one rescuer stroked his back lightly, he didn't flinch. He only breathed deeper, as if recognizing the touch. Outside, the first birds began to call. The rescuers stepped away, exhausted but calm. The night had been long, but it had held something quiet and sacred, a shared stillness between pain and peace. In the silence of early morning, Moti slept, the faint rise and fall of his body a small miracle against the vast, waking world. The first light of morning came soft and pale, slipping through the thin slats of the shelter's window. Dust floated in the golden air, each speck turning slowly in the hush that follows long effort. The rescuers stirred from their light sleep, still sitting near the pig's resting place, half dreaming, half listening for his breath. Then, a small sound, a grunt, quiet but steady. One man leaned forward, eyes widening. Moti was moving. His forelegs shifted, his head lifting shakily from the blanket. The swollen folds around his eyes had softened overnight. He could finally see. For the first time in hours, he looked around the small room. The wooden walls, the bowls of water, the men who had not left his side. He tried to stand, failing once, then again. The rescuers didn't rush in. They only steadied the blanket, whispering softly, "Halse Moti. Halse." On the third try, he rose, unsteady, trembling but upright. His hooves pressed into the concrete, and for a moment, the entire room held its breath. A deep, slow sigh escaped his chest, almost a release of everything the night had carried. The rescuers smiled quietly. One man wiped his face with the back of his hand. They had not expected this much strength so soon. After a while, they opened the shelter door. The cool morning breeze swept in, carrying the scent of wet soil and distant blooms. Moti hesitated, then took one step forward, then another. The light touched his skin, pale and warm, washing over the marks that would soon fade. He walked past the small water trough, the dry grass, and stopped by the open gate that led to the grove. The rescuers followed, curious but cautious. The grove was still. No hum, no movement, only the whisper of branches in the wind. And then they saw it. At the base of a low acacia tree, half hidden in a hollow, was a small dark shape. A broken hive, cracked open, its wax combs shattered, bees still crawling weakly along the ground. In the wreck lay the faint hum of a dying colony. One rescuer knelt and touched the earth beside it. There were fresh hoof prints, tiny, circling the spot. The realization came quietly. The pig hadn't stumbled into danger. He had come here for water, for fallen fruit, and maybe, by accident, had stepped too close. The hive had fallen from its branch in the wind, breaking open, and the bees had defended it blindly. Now, in the morning stillness, Moti stood beside the wreckage. He sniffed the air, then lowered his snout toward the ground. Not in fear, not in anger, but in a kind of slow recognition. The rescuers watched in silence as he lingered for a few moments more, then turned away toward the open field. He walked slowly into the sunlight, his steps small but sure. The last traces of the bees' hum faded completely into the wind. One rescuer whispered, "Deco, unbelievable, nah?" The other only nodded, watching as Moti's figure grew smaller against the horizon. The world returned to its calm rhythm, the kind that comes after chaos, when everything that could have been lost still remains. The men stayed there a while, quiet and still until the pig was gone from sight. The morning light spread wider across the land, soft and forgiving. Somewhere out there, a life that should have ended had begun again, not in miracle, but in quiet endurance, and in that silence, the desert air carried the hum of something greater than rescue, the sound of life continuing against all odds.